Good evening. How are you all? Nice to see you, Helen, Jane. Just adding a couple people
I
in.
made it. I made it this week to the tutorial.
Beautiful. I know it's like the most intense lightning and thunder I'd had experienced in a long time. So I imagine some people have probably had a bit of storm coming their way as well. Might have affected some people.
It's it's around it's morning time here in Europe. And
That's
very
right. You're
sunny
in Europe, aren't
outside.
you?
Yes, yes.
That's right. You're in Greece, yeah?
Yes, I'm in Greece and I'll be in London tomorrow.
Nice. Whereabouts in Greece?
Athens.
Oh,
Yeah.
lovely. Warm? I'd be starting to get a bit cooler, wouldn't it?
Oh, it's starting to get cool now. In the evening it's starting to get chilly, but hopefully not too much.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for joining from all the way over there. I'm sure there's much more exciting things you could be doing in Athens than sitting on a computer with us. Um,
True. That's okay. I was on the computer all night trying to get this assignment
yeah, I
done.
bet I'm
Oh no.
imagining you're all probably a bit stressed with that.
Yes, very stressed.
Beautiful. Well, we'll kick in and we'll do some of the questions at the end for the assignment if anyone's got them. But yeah, I'm imagining most of you are probably pretty far through it since that deadline's coming soon. So
Mm.
I'll just kick off. I'll acknowledge the country that I'm on, the Gumbaynggirr country and people here in Coffs Harbour area, and elders past, present, and emerging, and extending that respect to the lands you're all joining from as well. Again, pop in the chat where you're all coming in from. It's lovely to see that we're spread across. So we're halfway through. I'm sure you're feeling fatigue starting to kick in, assignments pressing for all of your subjects in the background. Couple in Brisbane. Beautiful. But this tutorial is a bit more theoretical. So last week we really looked at resources. Sorry, just letting someone in. We really looked at resources that you could be using, classroom setting, things like that. This time we're looking a little bit more at the theory behind race, the theory of, I guess, lack of a better term, whiteness, what that looks like and how we can teach and ensure that we're not falling into these unconscious bias patterns as well. So just looking at this a little bit more broadly, in this module, we're developing that understanding and how privilege impacts our own life and the life of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
I think
We'll look at
I also
developing.
think it really annoys me.
We'll also look at developing broad knowledge and understanding of that impact of culture, cultural identity, linguistics, all of these things, and how that culminates in what can look like racism and how we can ensure that we're avoiding that in our teaching practices and being aware of those theories. So we'll look at critical race theory and what that can look like on a more kind of day-to-day level as well. In this, there are a couple things you might have seen, some activities that you've come across again, you've come across before. It can be a little bit confronting, I think, personally, to see where you sit on particular issues or scales, or, you know, you might not have considered any of this before, which in itself can be a bit of a challenge to come across as well. So I'll definitely, I'll definitely encourage you to lean into it, but again, it might leave you thinking and feeling a little bit I guess unsure, or really questioning and looking at some of the things that you've learned over time. So it's quite a powerful session with some cool activities, but again, important for us to be, as we've said throughout this, really self-aware and self-critical throughout for this type of subject. So just looking at what initially that idea of identity. So as we said, and what's really important initially is that we don't get to decide someone else's identity. They get to decide it and tell us, you know. So in this, I guess more of a book definition, personal identity refers to the unique and enduring characteristics, qualities, and attributes that make an individual distinct from another. It encompasses the sense of self, continuity of being the same person over time. Personal identity can be shaped by a combination of psychological, social, cultural, biological factors and plays a central role in how individuals perceive themselves and their place within the world. So looking at some of those, and we discussed this in the first class, the first session as well, it's really important to have that personal identity for ourselves really clear when we're teaching others in this lens as well. So I guess just taking a couple of minutes, don't have to write it down, don't have to discuss it, but just really kind of honing back in on who am I, how do I fit into this whole picture as well is really important to see yourself within that. So just looking and considering who are you, where are you from, what places are important to you, and thinking about that in relation to the social norms, the day-to-day, the different cultures you might exist within, might have moved from. So just taking a couple minutes to be a bit self-reflective, and then we'll dive into that in terms of what that looks like as teachers. And I'll just let some more people into the room. Okay, so keeping all of that in mind, keeping an awareness and understanding of our own place within all of these different discussions, we're going to dive in a little bit into kind of that ideological background of it. So looking at this in critical race theory, and in particular what white privilege in racism looks like. So again, I'll just ensuring that we're not misconstruing anything, I'll just read it completely from the screen, and then we'll dive into a couple of the things after this as well. So whiteness is socially constructed, ethnocentric concept in which white culture dominates other cultures, such as those of many nations of indigenous Australia. It is an ideology that justifies the belief, system, and actions of those who have existed within the parameters of whiteness at the expense and exclusion of others. Aileen Morton Robinson defines whiteness as the invisible norm against which other races are judged in the construction of identity, representation, subjectivity, nationalism, and the law. Participation in whiteness does not require having white-coloured skin, but rather it includes anyone who benefits from the privilege of the systematic oppression that has developed from European colonialism and which continues to provide advantages in political, social, legal, and cultural arenas. Whiteness exists in many parts of the world with varying nuances. My essay is written for the context of whiteness in Australia and its impact on Australia's First Peoples. Wow, lots of stuff to digest. I think when we're looking at this, it's a really clear-cut definition and something that we can overlay on all those things that we've been talking about in the last 2 weeks. So you've got the policies, the legislation, the laws that Australia has brought into place, understanding that from the, I guess, inception of modern Australia up until now, you can overlay what she's talking about there. It's the understanding of whiteness superior to all. It's this belief and justification that some people are better than others, obviously creating the detriment of First Nations Australians. So that's kind of a bit more of that theoretical lens of what we've already seen in practice throughout time in those different ideologies, stolen generation, things like that we've looked at. So if I jump over, I should have loaded it. Sorry. Oh, I've got to download it. Anyway, if I jump over to this, again, this will all be available to you, but this is a really cool thing to have a look at. It's not super duper long, but it really explains this. Again, a little bit more dated. It's coming from 2020. So in 5 years, we've developed from that, but a really cool outline, clear understanding of how that theoretical implication of what we've looked at overlays within the Indigenous culture and experience in Australia. So again, it's pretty cool to have a look at this, what they've found, and then obviously a great place to be using your references, data, any stats can come from a resource like this as well. There's a word file called Indigenous Perspectives here that it has a huge list of things. Sorry, reading the comments out there. Thank you for adding that. Okay, so diving into this a little bit, we already spoke a lot about unconscious bias, but this is something, again, we have to be really aware of when we're teaching, when we're existing in this space to understand where our own own understanding of biases comes from our own kind of terminology. We're at a point in which we really need to be correcting and checking ourselves. You know, I remember a couple of years ago, someone had said, "Oh, you throw like a girl." You know, the classic. Why is that a bad thing? Like, it's really, we're at a point in time where we really need to be checking ourselves and ensuring that we don't have anything in our terminology that can be casual or I guess incidental racism as well. So that comes under acknowledging your unconscious bias. So looking at what that is. Unconscious biases are the learned stereotypes about certain groups of people that are formed outside of our awareness. They are automatic, unintentional, deeply ingrained in our beliefs, universal, and have the ability to affect our behavior. Unconscious bias can be favorable or unfavorable attitudes which form on the basis of positive and negative impressions of others. The Australian Human Rights Commission says that in classroom context, unconscious bias may affect the curriculum delivery. An example of unconscious bias in an educational setting would be if the curriculum content only included specific cultural perspectives and ignored others which were also relevant and important. An example of unconscious bias in a social context might be if when dividing up players for a soccer match, a captain unintentionally only chooses players of a racial background similar to their own. In thinking this, and I think it's obvious my own life experience, unconscious bias has a huge place and implication in gender studies as well, in place of gender. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But we'll look at this quickly. So I'm sure that you might have come across the Racism No Way, a really good space for you to go to. It's the Anti-Racism Board for Education within Australia. And this has some really cool outlines, different ideas. It's not only to, I guess, Indigenous and cultural differences, it goes through institutional racism, religious, things like that. So it's a really good one-stop shop to just ensure that you're aligning with these. So yeah, gathering and gaining other perspectives as well. So this is a really good resource to come to. In this, it talks about white privilege, what we kind of just looks like, and understanding where and how you might fall into that yourself with your own understanding of unconscious bias. Again, heaps of really cool resources as well. So I know that we looked at last week, lots of resources. Here's another site that's really good. It's got a special place for cultural and diversity as well, in which you can kind of draw on. So again, just pointing you to different places that might be really helpful in future, but for your assignments as well. Awesome. Does feel like I'm just talking a lot at the moment, but I promise we'll get to it when everyone else gets to be involved too. Again, this will all be available. This one I don't love as much because it's from an American perspective, but it's really cool in testing your own assumptions, your own stereotypes, where they come from. So we won't do it now. I'll pop it in the chat if you wanted to play with it in the break, but you kind of can take a specific test. So as you can see, it's really aligned for American audiences, but you can take a test and it's, yeah, just kind of understanding. It'll ask you some questions of what you believe, what you've seen, what you've experienced. And it really puts you on a bit of a scale of where you sit on a particular issue or if it's something that you've considered before. And so, yeah, a really good thing just to, sorry. Where's everyone? A good thing to have in the background and spend some time looking at as well if that's interesting to you. I've just popped that in the chat there. All right, moving on. So understanding, obviously, again, we've spoken so much about how important it is to be critically aware of ourselves. So in understanding cultures, it's really important that we have that clear background and intention and understanding of where we're sitting within a particular space and place. And so there are three kind of key ingredients to look at to ensure that we're doing this well. So the first ingredient to having good cultural competency and good cultural understanding is one, to work toward cultural competency, we must look within and without for a deeper understanding of ourselves and the culture of the people we serve. So again, a lot of people that have kind of done this course or towards the end have just had little notebooks and said, you know, this is something that I see myself doing, or this is something I know that I've done in the past. For me, teaching this has been huge. I can remember saying something in year 9 or 10. I'd obviously just heard it in the background or whatever. You know, I'm completely ashamed that I'd say something like that offhand in a school setting, now knowing, you know, I had to look in, it's the world I was surrounded by, things like that. So you have to have that really strong critical awareness, which can be uncomfortable at times, but very important to be learning in this space. The second is experience. So one cannot learn about a people or culture exclusively through books, movies, and classes. A Sierra Leone proverb, a paddle here, a paddle there, the canoe stays still. So in that, it's really important. As we've talked about, to be engaging with community, we've got a whole module, I think it's module 6, we have a whole module on community, how you can engage, how you can embrace. The best places to go, we've talked about this, engaging with land councils, things like that. To have a, I guess, first-hand experience and understanding of culture. On that one, there is a really cool study. It was a couple of years ago, but it came out of the United States, and it was a study of their Marines department, or whatever the Marines do. Basically, they found that people were randomly selected and placed on this ship to go out, that ship to go out. It was completely random. But when they came back, they found that the people who were on ships with African Americans came back with far less I guess racism, racial tendencies, things like that, because of the exposure. You know, they'd become friends with these people, they'd developed, they'd shared their culture. And so I guess experience really softens and brings that togetherness. So when you're seeing people up close, you're seeing and understanding them and creating more of a friendship rather than an otherness or a respect. That's where you can really come. So that point of experience to understand and build your cultural competency is really important too. The last one is positive change. So cultural competency does not exist without demonstrated positive change, both in education, clinical setting, and the real life environment in which students or clients must function. We must also act on the knowledge, turning our understanding into more effective programs and services, which is what you are all doing as our wonderful teachers. I might pause there because I do realize I've been talking a lot and there hasn't been a lot of space for questions or comments. I might pop you into groups very quickly. Here we go. And just discussing if this is a new concept to you, if you can see kind of that critical race theory or theory of whiteness and how it would, I guess, have implications on your teaching. Again, it's just, I don't have a really clear question for you to answer, but just more of a discussion around what we've spoken about and how that sits with you. So I'll pop you into breakout rooms for 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll come back and talk about this next activity. Sound all right? Beautiful. Off you all go. I can see you. Beautiful. I feel like there's a couple more faces in the room too, which is lovely. Does anyone want to share maybe 2 or 3 thoughts from people on what was discussed in your small groups? I'm afraid of a Zoom silence. I'll sit here in silence until someone's.
I know ours was pretty rich with content. I was just gonna say maybe Helen, you'd like to share what you said yourself, because well, not all of it if you don't want to, of course, but I just thought you said some great things around.
It's okay. You
Yeah.
can say, yeah, you can say
Yeah.
what
Okay.
you picked up from it. So that's
Yeah.
fine. You can go ahead and
Totally. Thank you. Oh, yeah. I mean, our group, I was just talking about how I watched the Stan Grant video in this week's content that was confronting and powerful. And then Helen shared some great lived experience around what it was like to grow up, I think, European Greek alongside Aboriginal people in a community. And just some of the ways that even it wasn't that long ago that she was saying, basically there were separate areas for people that went to a pub that were Aboriginal and then white, or that there was the same if you went to a post office or the like. And it's just really a good reminder of, like, you know, things change, but it's not so long ago that that was happening, and that's really quite confronting and yeah, completely, I guess, separate and yeah, something that people have lived through and is still around and seeing change, but change isn't going far enough, I think was what I was picking up from Helen as well. Yeah.
yes, the trauma of the 1970s and 80s. It's just that and reconciliation of those, but it's a long, slow process because everything's embedded in community and society and the biases and the stereotyping, and it's very hard for society to change. Very hard. And even if we embed all these reconciliations and policies and things in the school system, good. But then we have to think about where these children are culturally coming from and what they have learnt from their families and communities. And that's where the conflicts are. And we have to sort of teach our children to be able to sit down and be aware of the new way of thinking, belonging and knowing and doing in society today, in the practices to be in a better future. So that's what I believe in today. Sorry.
No, thank you both. It's great to hear that it was a good discussion, but yeah, I totally agree. It's like a generational thing, you can support
Yes.
and you guys will be supporting the young ones to learn this, but it's how do we address that more broadly? Yeah. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. One other group, anyone else want to share quickly before we go to the next activity?
We talked a bit more, I guess, a little bit lighter, but just assumptions, making assumptions in general, and assumptions we'd made in the past, and then got a little bit practical about how can we avoid some of those things happening and coming into our like practices.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, yeah, it's about being self-reflective on what do we assume as people, what have we learned as kids about this stuff. So, I'm glad to hear it was good discussions. We'll move on quickly. This is probably what I was referring to when I said some of the activities can be a bit more confronting. So I'm not sure, has anyone, hand up if you have heard of the privilege walk at all? I did it at university. Beautiful. Maybe learning. There we go. Cora said yes. Awesome. So yeah, this is an activity. I think Evolve Communities designed it. But it's essentially an idea just to do exactly that. Start thinking about the roles of, social privilege, discrimination, disadvantage. Again, it's not something, and I think this is what I initially thought. It was not something to place guilt on. It's not for anyone to decide where and who and how you sit within this. But again, it's just something to make awareness. So essentially what it is, you can do it in different classroom settings as well. You just line everyone up and then you ask different questions. And if someone, you know, I'll go to the questions on the next page, but have you attended university? You take a step forward. Did you grow up in a single parent household, which obviously has more challenges, like you take a step back. So again, it's not to be a guilt thing, but it's just to show that people don't start at the same point growing up. We have different experiences, and it's not a black or white, a racism thing. It's a very different setting. So again, here are a couple of the questions. I feel like it'd be great to do this, but on the Zoomies, it's a bit hard to create this. But essentially we could all line up and, you know, for example, if you're male, all the males would walk forward a step. If you attended private school, you would walk forward a step more. If your parents ever had to work more than one job to support, you'd step back. If one parent went to university, step forward. If you're Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, step back. And then what you get at the end of the activity is a completely different place point. So again, it's not to show the he has, she hasn't got type thing. It's just to show and acknowledge that we don't all have the same starting point. So we shouldn't expect people to all have the same experiences and levels. So again, it can be quite confronting. The questions can change in shape. But again, it's a really good activity just to have self-awareness and understand that other people have overcome things that maybe you haven't, or you've overcome things that other people haven't. So there used to be a video last year. There was a video, but they must have taken it down. It was this video and they explain it. But if you wanted to, sorry, I'm probably giving you all seasickness here. Again, I'll pop it in the chat, but this is where it comes from. And you can kind of do it yourself and place yourself within the activity online. And then Evolve Communities basically talks about where you would sit within that scale, how to run the workshop yourself, how to explain the workshop, and then why is it actually, gosh, I have a hiccup, sorry. Why is it important for us to understand where we sit within the scale of things, how we can be a supportive ally, how you can, you know, better put yourself in a position if you perhaps haven't had these same, I guess, advantages or privileges growing up. So again, a really cool activity that can be confronting. I wish there was the video, there's not, but something just to keep in mind. That's what I just opened up. Awesome. Does anyone have any comments or questions on that? If you have partaken in it before, ideas on how you would feel if you did that in a classroom setting, perhaps?
Well, I suppose if you got your students to do this exercise in the classroom, you could do, you know, the profiles of the students, and you as a teacher can understand where they're coming from. Better for classroom management. Yeah.
Big time. You're right. You get a glimpse into what people might be going on for them in the background as well.
At home, and yeah, gives you more insight.
There we go. Ella's put a video in to have a look at in the break. Cora?
I think, like, I don't necessarily agree that it's a great thing to do in a classroom. I think with older adults that have the emotional context to deal with it, sure. But I don't think it's necessarily a great thing to expose for kids to have to expose their traumas that they're still working through, that may be very current, that their parents are going through a divorce, or that they haven't had every meal, or like you've got emotionally immature students dealing with knowledge. As a teacher, it's great knowledge to have, but whether the students collectively as a body have the capacity to deal with it maturely, I don't necessarily think. Yeah, you'd have to be very discerning.
Absolutely. And something on that, I think it went back in this activity, you know, it's agreed, like it needs to be age sensitive. And it might be removing questions, asking different ones. But yeah, I definitely agree, you know, if it's more of an adult reflection activity or a later end of high school stage as well.
I was just going to make a comment, if that's okay, about something I've done similar.
Go for it.
So it's probably useful, maybe not, the paper toss activity. So people in a classroom can just write down their name on a piece of paper, scrunch it up, and try and get it in the bin at the front of the room. And then you could go around the room and just say to folk, like, or kids, sort of how was that for you from where you were sitting in the room? And then kind of conceptually explain that sitting in the room and getting a piece of paper to the front is harder depending on where you start in the room. Yeah, I just thought maybe that's more friendly for a classroom, but yeah, I really like it.
Yeah, explaining a similar concept. That's a good one. Someone else is off mute. Tio, sorry, I just pronounced that for you. Anyone else? We'll move on quickly. Beautiful. Thank you. That I definitely agree, and it's good to be, you know, aware of different things that are going to work in different settings and not. But again, looking at that evolved community and how they do it, what kind of different activities they do, and with what ages as well. But then looking at this again, where the whole thing's kind of how can you understand and reflect on privilege and your own place within that. So coming from the practical reconciliation site, we've got acknowledging privilege shouldn't be threatening to those who have it because it changes depending on the context. As Auntie Manya says, when I'm walking down the street and I see a homeless person, I'm more privileged than them in that context because I have a good job and a beautiful home. It's not about feeling guilty about your privileges. You can't help the family you were born into and the disadvantages you got through life. It's about being aware of how those privileges disadvantage others and help those around you and helping those around you. Looking at this, I guess, in a more kind of school-based setting, so racial identity formed early in life is an important contributor to self-concept, self-esteem, and overall sense of self for Aboriginal children and youth. A critical developmental period starts in pre-adolescence when external others can have a profound influence on how Aboriginal youth view themselves. Aboriginal students' well-being was related to their feelings and knowledge of whether they fit in as an Aboriginal person, how they were accepted and treated by others, how they socially interacted with others, and how they were engaged by others, both in the classroom and the playground. It's imperative that Aboriginal students attend school equipped with strong and robust mental well-being, which we've seen in the cross-curriculum priorities. Equally important, though, is that the school is equipped to ensure that they have adequate cultural security so that Aboriginal identity of the student population is developed, maintained, and promoted. So again, looking at that, how it connects to the whole community, we'll look at in one of the later modules for this. Unfortunately, racism is a contributor to the racial identity of Australia's Aboriginal people with many experiencing it on levels and facets of daily life. Comes from two ways, teaching and learning. We'll watch a quick video. Again, I'll give you the link to it because my sound goes funny. And then, there you go. Oh, I think I did that before and it just worked. Did anyone find the video on that? No, it's not there, is it? If you want to try that as well, I don't think it's there though. It was here earlier, Maddie said. On from that, apologies. Did anyone get the video working? No, okay, it's not there. All right, we'll do this one and have a little bit of a chat back in those groups. So again, we've looked at this in the last couple of, did we look at this last week, or am I thinking of when I did this last term? We looked at this yet? No, not yet, okay. Getting everything mixed up. So again, this is a really good depiction of kind of what culture looks like and what it looks like from surface level and then of that deeper level. So again, you've got on the surface level, the really, I guess, more stereotypical upfront ways in which we view culture and differences. And then beneath that, you've got more of the unseen impact, the unseen values and morals that different cultures bring with it. So having a look at this, I'll keep this picture up for you. I'll pop you back into the groups, but just discussing, I guess, different examples of that really clear visual impacts of culture, what that looks like. And then a little bit more of the invisible impact and the invisible elements of culture that aren't so clear. Obviously, there's a couple here. See if you can add any more onto these. And then in your discussion, considering how does this impact the way that you teach? So we'll have those discussions. A couple of people have said that the video's working. Maybe we'll come back to that afterwards, and in the break we can watch that video. I'll see if I can get it up too. But in the meantime, I'll pop you back in those groups just to discuss this slide. There we go.
And oh, we're in a different. Okay.
Yeah, we were at mid-conversation, Helen, and we're
Oh,
back.
sorry. Yeah, because maybe they don't have economic, the parents to buy themselves. I think uniforms are great because it just brings that quality, equality and equity in the classroom
Yeah,
on an even level. So
that's true.
yeah.
The for and against is quite strong, isn't it, with uniforms? Yeah, I'm remembering a conversation I had as well. Yeah.
Mm.
Awesome. Yeah, it seemed everyone was very deep in discussion. Normally I shut the rooms and everyone kind of flies straight back in, but you all took your 60 seconds, which is fantastic. How was this? What were some of the things that you might have added to this iceberg that wasn't already on there?
I forgot the ice. I should have taken a screenshot. Um,
All good. What did you chat about?
um, oh, just an example of when I don't know if it applies to this or not, but I had a few Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students in a class I was at placement teaching, and especially the year 8 class. And there was a boy that he was like on a learning plan, and he had trouble focusing, and he brought a footy every lesson in, even though he wasn't allowed to. And I just decided when it was my turn to teach, I'd just be like, hey, so do you like the Cowboys? And just make conversation with him about that, to try and because I sort of thought maybe I have no idea what goes on at home, if that's a big connector for him and his family, is to like the footy and footy teams, and maybe bring that into the classroom, and maybe that's part of his identity, like when he's not at home as well. So that was just
Engaging.
an example.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Others?
Yeah, I just likened it to the trauma iceberg of like what you can see in terms of behavior versus what's actually going on for the kid. So that it's kind of the same in the fact that what you see is not necessarily what's going on. There's normally more to the story, and just look a bit deeper.
Big time. Yeah. I guess having this in mind, how does it impact the way that you teach? Like Ben, that was, great. You obviously saw there was probably a bit more going on to that. So you integrate and you engage in that. Has anyone had any examples of that, like Ben, where you've maybe been teaching or been supporting the classroom and done something like that? Not one. I was going to add to this, just something in my workplace world, I guess, is that kind of beneath the horizon part is looking at, and particularly in terms for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, is kind of the ceremonial and cultural responsibilities. So a big thing that our workplace has is cultural leave, and I know a lot of workplaces are bringing that in, but often if there's sorry business, which is funerals or someone's passed, there's an obligation to be away for a long period of time. It's not just an hour at the local crematorium and off you go. So again, it's how can we understand and respect those different things that are going on for other people. In workplaces, it's not only the students that you've got to think about, it's colleagues as well in this setting, and family around them as well. So yeah, just those different things that kind of fall beneath that iceberg that might not be as at top of your mind. But thank you for whoever found that video. What we might do is I've just popped in the correct link. Thank you. Watch this video. Go and have a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 7:10 and then we'll finish off the rest of the tutorial. So watch that video, go and grab a snack, and then we'll come back at 10 past the hour. Sound good? Great. Beautiful, thank you. Might jump back into it quickly. I'm sure you all enjoyed a little break. I've got the black cockatoos like swooping in my backyard right now. It's just gorgeous, but they're doing lots of squealing and squeaking. How was that video that we just watched? Any comments on that? Was it surprising, some of the commentary from the students?
I thought it must have been for a while back, but it's really very recent. I was shocked that that is still the experience in schools that recent.
Yeah, very fair. Heartbreaking. Yeah, I know. This is why you guys have such an important job to do, isn't it? Anyone else?
I can understand like the issues and things like that, but as a teacher also, we are limited by the government on rules of how to sort of like diffuse these conflicts and things like that and be in compliant with policies. So this is a huge issue, and I think that's the issue, being in compliance with policy and how to rectify these issues when they arise, because you can only do a certain thing within those frameworks. Yeah, that's what I think about that.
Yeah.
Video, because you don't have rights as a teacher to do certain things, and sometimes children will take advantage of that you can't do anything, your hands are tied. So I don't know.
And that's why
it's an
it's,
issue. Yeah, and I think that's where it stems from, and I don't know how that will change unless policies change and attitudes and what the teacher can do and cannot do in situations like that.
And that's why it's important for the broader school body to be, be supportive
Yes.
within parameters as well, to support teachers and students in that way. Yeah. Fulbara,
right,
I think.
yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Helen.
I was just going to add that the student was well aware of the situations around, and she was not so much in despair, and then went to give her own suggestion, and that more education is needed to cope the situation. Yeah, just wanted to add that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a bit of a reality check, seeing something like that, isn't it? But ways in which we can look at supporting. So these are a bit more practical. Like I said, like one of the groups said, you talked about a bit of the theory of it and then practically what that looks like. So in this second half of the tute, we'll move into the resources and the practical side of how we can ensure that we're self-aware, how we can ensure that, that race theory doesn't embed itself into our teaching and into our school environment as well. So just a couple of the things here that are really kind of clear and laid out in how you can be supporting and scaffolding and using different tools and resources to be supporting different students. So just really briefly, I'll go through a couple. So you can make use of teaching resources to make sure that students are feeling best supported. This can look like visual supports, bilingual resources, scaffolded text, technology integrations. You can look at it in terms of your pedagogies and how you're actually teaching, a bit more of that kind of soft skill rather than hard techniques for students. So that's the explicit language instruction, multimodal learning, collaborative learning, culturally responsive teaching, which looks at incorporating those different texts that we've gone through, different resources and perspectives that introduce and include students' different cultural backgrounds, and using scaffolded techniques as well. In terms of what you can do for your assessments, there's a couple different things to look at. So one can be flexible assessment methods, changing up the parameters for what different students might need, having oral responses rather than written responses, visual presentations and multimodal presentations as opposed to just having written. Formative assessments, so checklist, exit tickets, think alouds to monitor progress and adjust teaching accordingly. Rubric modifications as well for students that might need some different stuff or different languages around these different things. And then extra time and support as well. So different things that students might need to be best supported in their assessment. So they're just a couple of different things. Obviously, as we say, teaching well for Aboriginal students is teaching well for all students. This is going to be case in point for everyone. So looking at this, again, I'm going to pop you into your groups. I might mix them up this time though. How do I recreate? There we go. Looking at this and just discussing maybe a little bit of the video that you watched, what your perspective was, and then naming a couple of things that are important to consider when embedding Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives into the curriculum. So I'll put you into your groups for probably 3 minutes or so, and then we'll look at a lot of the resources we can do and discuss the assignment coming up as well. Off we go. Loving this. You're all using up every single second for discussion in your little chats. Don't let me interrupt it. I'd love some of you to share the ideas that you've just chatted about. Maybe some different people we might not have heard from yet.
Well, in our group, we discussed like how we should try to use material which is from the mob, like created by the mob. And also if it could be specific, that was Jane's idea, to that Aboriginal community, then it would be even more effective.
Yeah, awesome use of materials. And as we saw last week, there was some really cool ways to do that. You know, that teacher had the kangaroo skin. Yeah, definitely integrating different materials from culture for one.
I'll go from our group because our group had all the people that have already talked in it anyway. Talking. We were just mindful of not tokenizing it as like an added bit to the lesson, like in fully integrating it as part of the flow of the lesson, rather than, oh, let's just tick a box. And also just being mindful of where the resources come from. And not only that, into the just not having one viewpoint and understanding how vast and varied Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures, their viewpoints and learnings and ways of being are, so that it's not as much as it's important to look at your own country and where you are. So for me, it's the Yugambeh people, but broadening their horizons beyond that so that they don't just think, oh, well, that's what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Making sure to incorporate the idea of that diversity, that it's not a one size fits all, that it's so different across different nations. And this is just what is done by this particular nation. Yeah, I think that's really important when you are integrating that learning, to make sure it's that you're prefacing that. Awesome. Last time I'll put you back in your groups. I hope you love having chats in there. This is something that I feel will relate to a lot of you. It certainly relates to me. And this is something, I guess, looking at the excuses. So a teacher has created this, and it's called Bringing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Perspective into the Classroom, No Excuses. So these are all of the different things and the stories that we will tell each other about why we shouldn't do it, or why it'd be hard or wrong for us to do it. I certainly know I, consider these questions and think about it myself a lot. And only through going through different cultural processes do you understand and learn that place. So I'll pop you back into your groups and I'll put the questions here in the chat as well. But just discussing a little bit about whether this is something that you've felt, whether it's something that you have considered for yourself, and then how and what you might do to overcome these questions and challenges for yourself in teaching. And then we'll go to the next slide, which has a couple of the, I guess, answers to these excuses. But I'll put you in your breakout room for the last time for probably 5 minutes or so, and just discussing these 5 different excuses and what you might do to rectify that. Sound good? Right. See you in a little bit. Kirsty?
I just jumped out, Jade, about, and I was mid-explaining to them what I was doing and then jumped out. Sorry, Ben.
No, that's okay. We were like,
Yeah, I was
you're
wondering.
frozen. or-
Hot-tailed
yeah.
it.
Gail. Keep explaining if you want. I'm not all back yet.
I was just saying how, like, misinformation, I think as teachers, we've accepted that we don't know everything, and it's always going to be a possibility that we're going to give misinformation at some point, regardless of what the topic is. And it's really a learning opportunity. Oh, I actually didn't see it that way, or I didn't know it like that. Thank you.
We're not infallible, you know, we have to be open to correct.
I can guarantee I am not the smartest.
That's it. Yeah, pop in the chat as well if you're not comfortable speaking or off camera. But did these resonate with anyone? Did you feel that you could tell you've been held up by some of these beliefs? Nods.
I feel like we talked about the blue ones, like the first and last one. You know, it's not my place to teach Aboriginal culture, and what if I give misinformation, like a little bit of that last one, because we all had different understandings, or maybe this is what I'm interpreting of, you know, and lived experience of working in spaces of acknowledgement of country and teaching it, and then explaining welcome to country. So we were kind of like, for me, it had a similar thing of, it's my place to do so to do an acknowledgement, not my place to do a welcome. Yeah. So that's how I kind of contextualized it from there. And then misinformation. Jane did a great job. I mean, not Jane, Kirsty did a great job of then explaining like, and then, yeah, just basically, I totally agree. Like, we're never done learning, and yeah.
Big time. That's a really good example, like, you know, that understanding of it's your place to acknowledge but not welcome. You know, it's your place to talk about and share but not teach culture, you know? Yeah, that's definitely a really good example to use. Yeah. Others?
We talked a bit about lots of listening needed to, like, you can combat those excuses by going, meeting people, listening, building your confidence, and using the resources to let other people speak for you as such, like letting the mob speak to your class themselves rather than trying to say it in your words.
Absolutely. And that's like, I think I've said this every class we've had. I always tell myself, I'm not the one speaking, I'm the one holding the microphone. You know, you can direct, you can point, you can showcase, but it's not you, you know. And if you can do that, as Kirsty said, if you can kind of come with that with a bit of humbleness and thank you for teaching me, I didn't know it in that way. If you can deliver information well, you'll be sweet. You know, it's all in the inference of how you're doing things. It's removing the ego to think you're in the right place to be telling and teaching a culture that's not yours, if you can do it well. Yeah, but I'll move on to some of the, I guess, counter to these excuses. I really like on this first one where it says it's not my place to teach about Aboriginal culture, which I feel is probably a main concern for a lot of people. Can you teach a poem about the Holocaust if you're not German or Jewish? You know, we can understand these things. We don't need to have that lived experience to make sure we're acknowledging and including it. So that's, I think, a really big one. What if I expose something sacred? I think this is something, again, probably a bit of an ego. I thought of this in my master's because I was doing my master's on sacred sites of Gumbaynggirr. The elders, they're not going to tell you something. If it's not publicly known, there's not really going to be a way that you're going to find it by accident. So again, that's definitely not too much of a risk. What if an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person comes in angry and then questions me? Again, a lot of this is in the delivery, in your attitude towards what you're teaching and embracing this space. So again, that's a big part of, as you said, Jane, listening, learning, making sure that we're humble with that. But again, you're in an ecosystem at a school, you've got support from different teachers, you've got support from exec level. So making sure that you're leaning on that in the support as well. I can't teach Aboriginal perspective because I don't understand about the culture. Again, kind of the same as that first one. Your teachers, I think Kirsty said this really well. It's lifelong learning, lifelong teaching, in where you're humble and you're acknowledging, oh, I didn't know it in that way, or that's how I can do something differently next time. And what if I give misinformation? Again, you can do this in any space. You can be a science teacher and give misinformation as well. So again, you're just in a position in society as teachers, I guess, as someone says, you're more exposed to that because of your position. Some of us aren't teaching all day, every day in our world. But again, it's cross-checking, it's engaging the correct resources, having those critical questions that we looked at from the IATSIS last week to make sure that you are engaging and going through the correct protocols and steps when you are using resources. But really good discussion. I'm glad a lot of conversations coming out of this space, because I feel it's best to have those discussions to make sure you are, it's nice to feel that maybe I'm not the only one that feels it might be uncomfortable to teach this because I don't want to do something wrong. So it's good that you've got each other bouncing off in those groups. This is something we'll just dive in kind of towards the back end, looking more particularly at certain resources. But we looked at this last week, coming back to it, because as I said, super duper important. Use this in your assignment. How are you asking yourself questions for the assignment? Here are those questions. What's the participation? Is it for us, by us, with us, in terms of Aboriginal community making that? How is it positioned? We'll go through a resource in a second, but just looking at it more broadly, what's the terminology around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders? How are they portrayed? Things like that. So making sure that, again, you're using resources that are accurate, that are positive, and that are including community and mob in the consultation and creation. And production. So again, can you see that it's produced well? Has it got the right warnings in place? Things like that. So coming back to this as your guiding light for your assignment and the rest of your life thereafter. Looking into a couple of particular resources as well now. So we'll just have a play around. I'll put this in the chat. Don't look at my search history. I'm not sure what's on there. So here we've got Southeast Queensland Indigenous Language Centre. Again, I know that my Gumbaynggirr has one. They've got Murabai, which are amazing. You can look at heaps of different resources there. Just having a play around, looking at what languages they've got. So this is more Sunny Coast. Awesome resources that you can bring in to students, lessons straight up. So again, if this is something that, maybe you're doing English or you're in primary school, looking at this as a really cool resource and place to start. What have I got next? Again, the Koori curriculum. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It is as it sounds. Really awesome place. It's got lots of tactile learning techniques, lots of resources on here, different ideas, different places to direct you in an area that you might be interested in going. And again, it's just awesome to feel supported in this space and place, knowing that you don't have to create it all from the start, that this is already being done. So using this to rely on, maybe your school has access to these resources already, and engaging with that. Again, I think what's really cool in this is that it's got a lot of discourse and conversation already going about how to be a non-Indigenous person in this space. So again, you don't have to be alone thinking about this. There are teachers, there are organizations thinking about this too. So tapping into a little bit of that and a little bit of the resources out there. Again, a lot of this is obviously to buy. As someone mentioned, it's somewhat tailored to younger students, as you can see as well. But just really cool. So it's got education, a whole bunch of people and places to be taking note of, professional development and learning. I could go on, but this is a really great place for you to start. As well with this education, I've just popped all in too. An example of this is the story dice that comes from there. So it's designed as a prompt for creative writing, yarning, and storytelling. So again, something to do for English, depending what kind of age and stage that you've got. A great tool for individual and group work. Story dice are open-ended resources. So again, you can have these and then create it off. It's based on that kind of 8 ways of learning: collaborative, yarning, tactile, So again, looking at that just in terms of assignment, what we've got here, felt like I had a link. No, don't have a link to that one. Is a Welcome to Country book explaining what Welcome to Country is, how it can be done. And this is on Storybox Hub. So there's elders worked with Lisa Kennedy going through this type of stuff. And again, can be a really good resource and tool to be putting into your assignment, but obviously using in the classroom setting as well. I do find a lot of value, as does Maddie, because she's pulled a lot of our work from Evolve communities. There's a lot of value in when an Indigenous and non-Indigenous partnerships form. So you've got Auntie Joy and Lisa Kennedy. That's really powerful because it's bringing both perspectives and it's ensuring that, you know, those hesitations that we talked about, that I feel, that I'm imagining some of you feel, in sharing and learning as a non-Indigenous person, you can feel safe in doing the right thing when you can see these partnerships form. So looking at some of those resources is really powerful as well. Last one to look at, I've already got it up. Again, this is really cool. It's a kind of tailored to younger students too, but it's all about books and teaching. This one's awesome. Information sheets for educators. Again, this comes to what your school already has available. There's going to be guiding principles your school in particular areas work for. And again, in your critical thinking mind with your assignment, who's the author? Can we trust the word of this woman? She's a proud Wiradjuri woman, an experienced teacher. So firsthand, she's creating it by mob, with mob, and for mob. So really important to have a play around on these. There's some really cool bits in here. I had this when we first started working. We actually got given some of this just for ideas and again, really cool. And it has more specific stuff to look at too for different subject areas. Am I going fast? No, I feel like I'm on time. Again, just on that same website, there's a list of some really good books that are useful, what they're useful for, different cohorts that you can be using it for, and yeah, using these resources to make sure that you're hitting those different teaching areas and syllabus points as well for different stages. All right, I've gone through a couple of those. Is this helpful? Showing different resources, different sites that you can use? Great. What we'll do, I'll give you, what about secondary science resources? Maybe we'll have a chat at the end. Have a play around on that curriculum. I know someone in this class previously is also in that space and a bit less aware of secondary resources, but again, it would just be using those known sites that we talked about, CSIRO, IATSIS, and then the bigger bodies of curriculum and diving into them as well and seeing what they've got. But in this, I'll show you. I'll let you watch this video and just have a quick view of the site yourself. So watch this video. I think it goes for a couple of minutes. Watch this and then we'll come back and discuss whether we think this is culturally appropriate as a resource. So having reasons why it is or isn't, and we'll come back and discuss it. So just give me a little hands up when you've watched it and we'll come back to discuss. I think I can see most people have watched. What was our perspective on that little video resource? Do you think it was culturally appropriate to use or not to use? In the chat maybe as well.
I may have zoned out, but I didn't see any warning of this may contain images of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and it also like just portrayed them as being in the nude. And when he was speaking, there was no translation of what it was.
I was just back on the website looking to see if I missed that, but yeah, 100%. I didn't see anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Before I continue, any other thoughts on the video and website?
There was no acknowledgement
Yeah.
of country and specific, like the mapping and everything. There was no reference to which lands and countries that this was mapped across. Only just the central, north, south, or west, or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was not nice to see nudity. And it's not appropriate for any age group, I think, in high school or primary school, for that nudity thing. And that was very disrespectful. And there was no acknowledgement for deceased people either. And it could be sort of traumatic or disturbing. It's not, no.
There was
Sorry.
actually an acknowledgement at the start on the opening page. It has the warning saying Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander viewers should exercise caution
Correct.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
watching the
And
program as images of deceased persons.
And-
It's actually on the opening page.
it also says the songline is a video clip from the documentary series, so it's just a snippet from
It's
the full
it's only
documentary.
yeah. So in
Right.
isolation, maybe not, but you would have to make
You
sure
have
that
to take
the
it in the
opening
context
page,
of the further
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it
Yeah.
was really quick on off. Yeah. Mhm.
I think it would have benefited from having the actual song lines when she spoke of it is actually show that, because it started to break the countries, which was amazing, but to expand on that would have given it so much more context.
Definitely, yes, lots of points. I think if we can view this in kind of that critical way of how we look at your assignments, looking at the date, so 2008, year of the sorry speech, things are happening, but where we've come from in 2008 till now is obviously huge in the way portrayal, the respect. So again, there's probably a lot of dated terminology in this, as Jane says in the tags. I'm not imagining this in itself is a very respectful term anymore. The word Aborigines is not really used commonplace. It carries with it negative connotations. So the use of that in and of itself is probably not the best to be using as a culturally appropriate resource. Something I think that just in terms of sticking out, as you've said, the nudity, the portrayal, Cora, as you said, is probably not the greatest. There is a lot of, I guess, more negative tone to some of it. And something as well in talking about the mythology that comes into it a lot, and they talk about it down here in the mythology. It's taken in more of a sense of like myth rather than this is spiritual fact for some people, and framing it in that way, in that it's not true or it's just a belief system, rather than I guess obviously, as we know, the dreaming is all incumbency in that relationship to country. So looking at just those different really slight ways in which something can probably be turned from a Western or I guess ethnocentric framing into something a little bit more derogatory, which you've picked up on, which is important. But yes, I think probably a little bit of a dated resource that perhaps isn't the best anymore. But awesome, you all to go through. Okay. Super quick, we're getting to the end. I know we always have so much content to go through, so I appreciate you being very patient. Continuing on in that terms of looking with self-critique and self-evaluation, just something looking at called an identity map. So we'll go through a couple of questions in the end, but again, it's something that Karen Martin has created, and the identity map helps us to acknowledge ways of knowing, ways of doing, ways of being, and ways of valuing. So an understanding of the culture of a learner is essential in maximizing learning potential. Understanding the way your own culture influences your ways of learning will help you understand the importance of this for your students as well. This highlights the importance of engaging Aboriginal perspectives in the classroom, just not through art and history, but by understanding and using processes of learning, knowledge transmission in all subject areas. So these are just for you a couple of questions to ask yourself, placing yourself within it, and then giving you a better, I guess, overall understanding. So how do you know that something is real? So again, questioning yourself, your own belief system. That was a really good example then, looking at the terming and framing of mythology rather than, I guess, spiritual fact or belief. Where are your ancestors from and how do you connect with them? So knowing that that's a big cultural element in Aboriginal history. How do we relate to ancestors? How do we relate to the people before and after us? And how can we understand our own prejudices or not, I guess, around a lot of these different conversations? Again, just some more questions. So that's addressing the ways of being. How do we know how we be? The ways of knowing, how do we know what we know? So how did you know the answers to the questions? What symbols are most meaningful for you? How do these symbols inform your life and work? What sort of things do you know implicitly? What have you been taught? So again, there's so much self-critique in this and so much rewiring and relearning of some of the things that we've assumed is probably cultural truth or, Bible to us. How do we know and how have we come to the point of what we believe to be true? And then the ways of doing. So why do we do what we do? How do we know that what we do is correct or incorrect? From whose perspective? So what is truth? How is our truth different to someone else's truth? What would be your top 3 rules for living? What's the most important thing in the world to you? Do you internalize new knowledge through dialogue, reflection, or both? So this is not only looking at ourselves and how we place ourselves, but how we process information. Are we addressing things from kind of a European Western centric point of view? Or are we addressing it from, coming from a different cultural background? And how in turn is that going to be different to how Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students might process different things as well? So making sure that we're questioning ourselves, not to unravel anything, but obviously to make your teaching practices better and more open for other students and other ways of being and knowing as well. We'll look at 8 ways later. I imagine a lot of you have talked about 8 ways anyway, but those questions, those reflections really relate to these different ways of teaching and the pedagogy of teaching. I got there eventually. And reframing a lot for ourselves so we can be teaching in that best way. So again, we'll discuss this later, but we've got stories, histories, different knowledges and pathways, different use of metaphors and symbols, relationship to time, linear, non-linear, the ways in which we organize, whether it be in the structured classroom setting, it be group setting, outdoors, tactile use, things like that. So all of those questions, going through those different ideas and then analyzing our own assumptions ensures that we're better at teaching this in deconstructing the ways that we've constantly thought about things. Awesome. I'll go through this super quickly. I feel like you're all super on top of it. Simon and Drew on Monday, so you've got a week to go. looking at obviously this first part of the description, age and stage, learning and justification, and then diving more deeply into its value and the resources, cultural appropriateness, using the tools and conversations that we've been going through in the tutorials to make sure you feel good doing that. And we have 1 minute left. Got in there just in time. Any other questions before we all head off and have yummy dinner?
Hi, Jay.
Hello.
Yeah. So if a resource is produced by EDUC6009, does it require further validation?
Yes, I would say yes. So if you're using a resource by EDUC6009, which is obviously going to be a really good resource, explain why it's a good resource. So addressing its cultural appropriateness, addressing the educational value. So it most likely is going to be a very good resource. Tell us why it's a good resource.
At least from cultural point of view, is it okay?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
That's awesome.
All right. Second question, please. Look, my learning area is digital technology. So I am trying to get use an online archive from EDUC6009 to develop or create multimedia artifacts. And this online resource has songs, photographs, films, all original indigenous materials. And I just need to use them as a group to develop that. I was asking this, but the last lecture, there was no time to answer it, I guess. So should I still go specific to either photograph or I just want to use more than one source? And all these are resident in the online archive. So what advice do you have to give me on this?
Yeah, good question. I think what you could do if it's all coming from the one resource, like the online archive, use that as your broad idea and then evaluating each individual parts, but that's kind of the broad resource that you'd be using.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right, thanks.
If you're still unsure, ask on the Blackboard or ask Maddie as well what she'd suggest. A good question.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome.
Got one
Any
more.
others?
Do you mind? Sorry. It probably has been answered, but being in Queensland, can we refer to QCAA or does it have to be the Australian curriculum when we're doing it?
No, definitely. If you're wherever you're based, you can use whatever resources are going to be most relevant to you.
Yeah, so just in terms of linking it back to syllabus and the curriculum, we can, okay, thanks.
Yeah,
cool.
just say I'm referring to, just say this is the one that I'm referring to. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
I might let everyone head off. I'll stay on for a minute or so for another question, but yeah, nice to see you all. I guess when we see each other next. Oh, I hope you all show up. You'll have like 5 hours until your assignment's due, so hopefully see you. But otherwise, good luck writing it. And see you next week.